When the Blair Witch Project came out in 1999, it gave audiences a fresh perspective on horror. First-person perspective. It drops you right into the shoes of the characters and sends you out into the woods to die. For a movie with so much wood, it's metal as fuck. Blair Witch Project's astronomical box office performance owed a lot to its innovative marketing campaign. In a time before social media, Wikipedia, and YouTube, and long before we'd ever hear the term fake news, the Blair Witch Project used the power of the internet to build up the myth that this was a bona fide witch snuff tape, especially because the film's found footage style hadn't broken through into the mainstream up to that point. Not a lot of Man Bites Dog fans in the United States at that time. But all that grassroots hype was backed up by what was and still remains an incredibly effective scary movie. But why is it so scary? Ask most people what the Blair Witch Project's about and you'll get some variation on a group of student filmmakers get lost in the woods and get hunted by a witch. And if that's what you go in expecting, I get how the camera whipping around at night and never quite landing on a witch could feel like a letdown. I want to give you the same advice that I would give Josh here. Adjust your focus. Because the Blair Witch Project isn't a movie about a witch stalking 3 filmmakers who are lost in the woods. It's about 3 filmmakers who are lost in the woods and losing their minds.
You gonna write us a happy ending, Heather?
When you keep that primal human element in mind, you start to realize that the Blair Witch Project is really at its scariest in the bright light of day.
I'm scared to close my eyes. I'm scared to open them.
Let's be honest, the Blair Witch Project's most famous moments do take place at night, but then that's the case for most horror movies. Humans are naturally inclined to feel more unsafe in the dark. What could be lurking just out of our field of vision that's ready to attack? Presented as an in-production documentary, the Blair Witch Project shot on 16mm film and high-8 tape, and that low-fidelity footage serves as its own source of tension when the sun goes down. Even if there's something out in the dark, there's no guarantee that these cameras will be able to pick it up. Just what is being obscured by all that noise? What can the characters holding the cameras see through their own eyes that we can't through the lens? When student filmmakers Heather, Mike, and Josh are chased out of their tent in the night and Heather screams, "Oh my god, what the f*** is that? Dude, what the f*** is that?" It's not just the chaos of the moment that's frightening, it's that the Blair Witch could be somewhere out there and we can't see her. We're naturally programmed to expect danger in the dark, and that's just why horror set in the daytime can hit so hard. It feels like it upsets the natural order. We're supposed to be safe in the light. Those are the rules. Alan Wake says so, all the time. It's why Michael Myers standing behind this bush, or behind this sheet, long enough for Laurie to see him, but not long enough for her to be sure that he's really there, creates so much dread. Or why this doofus getting brained by Leatherface out of nowhere is so shocking. Although, not that shocking, dude was trespassing and you don't pull that shit in Texas, everyone knows that. But the Blair Witch Project is no slasher. It's rooted most strongly in folk horror, where evil manifests as a force of nature that can't be reasoned with and corrupts absolutely, no matter what societal conventions or technological advances the characters cling to. The arrogance of modern belief in the face of ancient power is a common theme in the genre. It crops up not just in the Blair Witch Project, but in a long list of films, from the 1973 classic The Wicker Man to more recent highbrow horror like Ari Aster's Midsommar and Robert Eggers' The Witch. It's something the latter of which telegraphs immediately. The opening scene has William flipping the bird to the town council and saying, "All I need to survive in the woods is my family and God." Thomason knows that he's dooming them, and Eggers underlines that with the family down on their knees in worship as the forest they're about to enter seems to be screaming in a chorus of voices. And those voices are saying, "Don't live here, idiots, you're gonna get witched! Black Phillip! Black Phillip!" The characters are often driven mad by the growing awareness that they are not going to be able to outsmart the forces that prey on them.
The devil!
No, it not.
The devil will speak scripture too!
No, it not. It's not true.
We are damned!
Wait!
Those forces are often invisible or obscured in folk horror, which fittingly brings to mind an adage that's as true of The Witch as it is of the Blair Witch Project. Nothing is scarier than that which we make up in our own minds. Our imaginations are especially adept at filling in blanks caused by restrictions on our perspective with our own personal anxieties and fears. And when it comes to restricted perspective, found footage movies have a built-in advantage. It's the great equalizer of the subgenre, the conceit that we as the audience are experiencing these horrors through the same lens, literally, as the unfortunate souls involved. If the film succeeds in drawing in the audience like the Blair Witch Project does, that can open up unique opportunities that filmmakers can use to create visceral experiences that may not be as easily achievable in traditionally shot movies.
I see why you like this video camera so much. It's totally like a filtered reality, man. It's like you can pretend everything's not quite the way it is.
With the outsized focus on perspective built into found footage comes the key to how the Blair Witch Project weaponizes it: disorientation. Disorientation is at the heart of the Blair Witch Project's approach to building dread, and it's not just deployed during the nighttime scenes. It permeates every facet of the production. From the outset, the Blair Witch Project's co-directors, Daniel Myrick and Eduardo Sanchez, wanted the movie to feel as authentic as possible, so they focused on casting actors with backgrounds not only in improvisation, but in operating film equipment. They'd be the ones shooting the movie, and using their own names in the film no less. Instead of a script, Myrick and Sanchez produced a 35-page outline of the important beats to hit, leaving the actors to come up with the dialogue in real time as they experienced the Blair Witch's evil firsthand. The true evil, Hollywood accounting, which cut them out of a fair share of the movie's royalties, wouldn't rear its head until later. Myrick and Sanchez coordinated drops of food, batteries, and replacement media for the three to shoot with, but direct interaction with the cast was kept to an absolute minimum to maintain their sense of isolation and to preserve their reactions to new information that they collect about the Blair Witch along the way.
Voodoo stuff is hanging all over. Look around.
No way.
They're all over the place.
Holy sh**.
It's a very shaggy approach to making a movie, but from the top down, that lack of direction creates a reality that feels a little more real. We as the audience feel as lost, as disoriented as the characters, and probably the actors who'd signed on for this indie film. That's why the early scenes in the Blair Witch Project are so important, because they give us the only real solid ground to stand on. This movie really is one of the worst to be glancing down at your phone during, not only because that sort of breaks the illusion a little bit, it's kind of like peeking out from underneath a VR headset, but because the Blair Witch lore established early on is critical to understanding the dangers ahead. The movie splits its first act between establishing the rapport between the filmmakers and interrogating the origins of the Blair Witch legend. Heather, Josh, and Mike interview the citizens of Burkittsville, a town closely tied to the witch's origins. The townsfolk don't all believe the legend, but those that do, really do.
All of a sudden I felt like something was near me.
Right?
You know, kind of an eerie feeling. It was like a woman.
The most significant story, besides the Blair Witch's rumored origin, is that of Rustin Parr, who in the 1940s claimed the Blair Witch manipulated him into luring children to their deaths in pairs of two, forcing one to stand in the corner of his basement while he killed the other. Yes, this story hints towards the significance of that famous final shot, but along with everything else the filmmakers learn in town, these interviews also tease the Blair Witch's strong influence not over just her victims' free will, but the laws of nature that keep them grounded in reality as they wander into her woods.
But upon inspection, the bodies had been removed by persons unknown. The search party claims that the stench of death was still thick, and whomever had taken the bodies had done so in a matter of hours.
Co-director Eduardo Sanchez refers to this area of influence as the Blair Witch bubble. When you're on her land, you play by her rules, and her rules f***ing suck. They don't make sense, and rules that our logical minds can't trace the logic of are very scary. But the Blair Witch Project takes its time before it really pulls the rug out from under Heather, Mike, and Josh. As the crew travel into the Black Hills Forest, Heather, Mike, and Josh spend a lot of time vocalizing how skeptical they are of whether the stories of the Blair Witch have any basis in fact, even as the evidence starts to pile up, like the perfect little rock formations that magically appear outside their tent one morning, or in the form of everyone's favorite nature sounds playlist to fall asleep to. Hey Google, play giggling f***ing children and tent shaking noises! As the characters are quick to point out, woodland tomfoolery does not a Blair Witch make. They're still sharing a pretty strong baseline of what's real and what's not.
What do you think that was last night?
Personally,
Yeah.
I think it was someone f***ing with your head.
But at this point, whether those nighttime incursions are coming from a witch or Bert and Ernie over here fishing in the river, it's not all that relevant. They are still very disturbing. And yes, these things are all happening at night, but it's only when the sun comes up and the trio continue their doomed attempt to return to their car that we see the psychological weight being loaded onto them, and how that's becoming their unmaking.
Are you not scared enough?
No, but why you?
Put the camera down, this is not funny.
coming.
This is...
Do I look like I'm laughing at all?
No, but you're going around doing your documentary thing, man. You're still doing your thing.
And turn the goddamn thing off!
The rapport and friendliness between the three filmmakers we got a taste of earlier on doesn't last long as they struggle more and more to explain their compounding bad luck.
What bugs me out is that we're so damn deep in the woods and people are gonna try and come out here and mess with us, then they gotta have something wrong with them, and I'm not gonna play with that.
But how do we know it was people?
Well, even if it wasn't, I'm not gonna play with that either.
This movie's set in 1994 when cell phones looked like this, so instead of Google Maps, the crew is working with just map. Heather gets defensive quickly about her understanding of the terrain, throwing out facts like it's impossible to get lost in modern day America, which is as wrong today as it was then. Mike's erratic outbursts might be burning off steam for himself, but they don't do much to instill confidence in his colleagues that he'll be reliable in an emergency. And Josh's refusal to hedge his bets and respect the Blair Witch's totems set him up for his early, gnarly exit.
Please tell me you didn't just knock that over. That's not very nice.
The camaraderie they started with sours into suspicion, and every other line of dialogue is a microaggression.
I find it very cool that I get laughed at because my shoes are wet for the rest of the day. I find that f***ing hilarious.
All of the preparation, all of the research, all of the bonding that the crew did before entering the woods, with each passing hour, it means less and less. And because we're essentially living all this through their eyes, the question of what's really going on starts to feel just as existentially dreadful to us as it does to Heather, Josh, and Mike. All three of them are holding on to one simple fact to maintain their sanity. Up to this point, everything they've experienced, sticks cracking, tents shaking, creepy kids being creepy, it all has a possible rational explanation. The crew interviewed as many people as they could in Burkittsville. Any of them could have decided to make a weekend out of it and follow these uppity film students into the woods to give them more than they bargained for. Even Mike's completely inexplicable act of kicking their map into the river, which could maybe be construed as the Blair Witch pulling his strings, has plenty of basis in how the movie sets him up as being the most impulsive and the most frightened of the three filmmakers. And that brings us to the scene around which the entire movie pivots, to something that can't be explained. The moment the characters can no longer chalk their misfortune up to nasty locals, and it's one that takes the characters' disorientation and the audience's to another level.
All right. Here I go. I hate crossing streams on logs. If I never cross another stream on a log for the rest of my life, I will die a happy girl.
Heather, Josh, and Mike have been lost in the Black Hills Forest for 4 days, and they decide to spend an entire day following their compass south along the river. After Mike ditched the map, the compass was presented as the group's last best hope at navigating their way out of the forest. Hell, we even saw it working perfectly well. It guided them to their earlier checkpoints just fine.
There it is. See?
And in any case, they're following a river, 2 solid, tangible markers with which to orient themselves in physical space. This is when the crew's hubris comes crashing down on them, when the extent of the Blair Witch's power over them becomes unavoidable. How is it that walking in a straight line along a river for 15 hours led the crew back to the exact same place they started earlier that morning?
No, that's the tree we crossed. That tree is down. That's the same one. Oh, God!
No. Oh, no.
You gotta be kidding me! This is a joke!
It's a total violation of logic, of common sense, and a confirmation that Heather, Josh, and Mike are at the mercy of a force they can't understand, compete, or reason with. If they can't rely on the notion that walking in one direction all day should leave you winding up somewhere new, what other simple truths that gave the crew comfort can no longer be trusted? This happens 4 days into the 8 that the crew will go on to survive, but in this moment, in broad daylight, we're forced to accept there's no escape from the woods and no safety for the crew.
It's the same. It's the same logs.
Things are falling apart. Heather, Josh, and Mike are falling apart, and the center doesn't hold for very long.
Okay, here's your motivation. You're lost, you're angry in the wood, and no one here is here to help you. There's a f***ing witch and she keeps leaving outside your door. There's no one here to help you. She left little trinkets, you f***ing took one of them. She ran after us. There's no one here to help you. We walked for 15 hours today. We ended up in the same place. There's no one here to help you. That's your motivation.
Josh disappears shortly thereafter, and the Blair Witch ships pieces of him back to Heather and Mike. Those two, who remember were ready to kill each other over that discarded map, are reduced to cradling each other and rocking back and forth on the ground. And whose perspective are we seeing this from? The visual language of the movie up to this point is all about putting us right into the characters' shoes. So it's noteworthy that this is one of the only shots in the entire movie where the camera isn't being handled by someone. One moment of objectivity in a sea of wrong turns and fatal misunderstandings that tells us that these two scared kids are destined for the basement where the Blair Witch brings all of her lost children. The Blair Witch Project's impact was undeniable, with the low budget and sky-high box office returns inspiring countless found footage horror movies, most of which missed the point of what made the movie so gripping in the first place. Even the efforts to continue the Blair Witch story have seen mixed results. Book of Shadows was a messy meta-sequel that got bogged down by being self-reflexive for the sake of it.
You know, if you don't believe in the Blair Witch, then why the hell did you bother to come?
I thought the movie was cool.
2016's Blair Witch was better, but even though it accounts for the witch's reality warping powers pretty well, like when the witch turns off the sun and detaches these redneck kids from the space-time continuum.
When was the last time you saw us?
Earlier this afternoon.
It's been 5 days since we saw you.
Adam Wingard's sequel also controversially shows the Blair Witch, which kind of misses the point of why the first movie was so scary. That leaves Bloober Team's 2019 Blair Witch game as the strongest Blair Witch sequel, in my opinion anyway. The story-heavy game channels the first-person perspective of the movie and emphasizes tone and tension over action. By the time you've made it to Rustin Parr's house, your institutional knowledge of how dangerous this place is makes every step a nail-biter. The game at least scratches at what the Blair Witch Project does so well. It makes the woods terrifying. So often, what happens in a movie can distract from what that movie is actually about. The Exorcist may be famous for its spider walking, head spinning, and pea soup puking, but take away all those supernatural trappings, and you're left with the story of a mother pushed to her breaking point and willing to try any remedy to cure her daughter's terrifying condition. The Blair Witch Project isn't so different in that way, and the fact that the filmmakers all fall victim to the Blair Witch is only part of the tragedy. The real horror here is watching Heather, Mike, and Josh's sanity stripped away from them through their eyes, one bright, sunshiny day at a time.
You all right?
I'm okay. And I'm just very hungry, and I'm very tired, and I'm very scared, and I just want to go home, okay?